a 1-sentence email that said, "What's your cell phone number? Hey, you want to come work for MeatEater?" It was a big deal, man. It was a life-changing deal. This bear just comes in, he sees me, and basically gets so close to me, I backpedal, stands up on his hind legs about 3/4 of the way, drops down on all fours, and I shoot him at about 3 yards.
No way.
Let me give you one piece of advice with this magazine. Forget the dogs. That's dying. You don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I just knew. I was like, you are dying on the vine.
In the Arkansas hunting world, he's kind of the pride and joy, if you will, of Arkansas, and so we're excited to get to hang out with you. And I'm curious, for all the things that you do, you know, when you're out to a dinner party or you're at the store and someone asks what you do for a living, what do you say? How do you answer that question?
I tell them I'm in outdoor media.
Okay,
Just outdoor media.
all right.
Hunting conservation media.
Yeah.
You know. And depending on how much they want to dig, I might, you know, say, do you know the company MeatEater or whatever?
Open it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I wanted to kick it off with some kind of rapid fire.
Let's go.
Get to know you
Right.
questions. And so I'll start with hunting, and then I'll kind of transition over to some fishing. So these are going to be some would you rather questions, okay?
Okay.
So duck hunt or turkey hunt?
Turkey hunt.
That was quick. Bear hunt or elk hunt?
Bear hunt.
Whitetail or mule deer?
Whitetail.
Come on. All right, this one's interesting. Predator trapping or predator hunting?
Predator hunting.
Hunting, okay. All right, now I'm going to switch gears. We're going to go fishing here.
Okay.
Smallmouth or trout?
That's. I'm not even going to answer that. Smallmouth.
Come on, there he is.
That's the right answer.
There's no native trout in Arkansas.
No, sir.
Okay.
Even though we've got world-class trout fishing.
We
They're
do.
not native.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay, lake fishing or stream fishing?
Stream fishing.
For smallmouth,
For
Yeah.
smallmouth.
specifically.
Okay, here's one. Spin rod or fly rod?
Spin rod. Spinning and sinning.
You know, I saw you fishing the other day on Instagram, and you were sporting what they call a hippie stick,
Mm-hmm.
and you were throwing the fly rod, and I'm curious, what was that experience like for you?
You know, I've been around fly fishing quite a bit, and have fly fished. I've never. Well, I fly fished a fair bit, but I do not consider myself a fly fisherman. For no, I'm not against it at all.
Yeah.
You know, my good buddy Josh Lambridge, Spillmaker, big fly fisherman. My son, big fly fisherman. My brother, big fly fisherman. I just had to make a decision 20 years ago when my kids were born and I was an entrepreneur and doing a lot of different stuff. I knew I couldn't be passionate about fishing, and I pretty much cold turkey quit.
Really?
Oh yeah. So I grew up catfishing, grew up smallmouth bass fishing and little mountain creeks. Loved it. But I have fished comparatively to hunting very little in the last 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it was just a choice I had to make.
Would hunting take up all of your time year round, or was it
It was-
banking family time and really making sure that's important? And then when it's hunting season, I'm hunting.
Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you know, I've fished probably a little bit every year in different places, but I don't own a boat. I don't own good fishing tackle. But you know, we jug fish for catfish. Some we do some stuff, and I feel like it's funny because I feel like I love it and am passionate about it. My son's been catching some really nice brownie bass, and
Yeah,
I mean
he was
it
talking
is
about it.
no. I mean, I told him, it's like, man, this is major. You know, catching brownie bass. This is big time. I know the excitement. I love it. Grew up doing that, but kind of had to make a dedicated decision to be specialized.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, it's easy to kind of want to do it all,
Mm-hmm.
but if you really want to dive in and go deep, especially with Bear Hunting Magazine, like we talked about, you're really focusing in on very specifically kind of one thing, even within the hunting world.
Yeah.
Um,
I was for that, and we can talk about this.
yeah.
That would be the perception, because the media that I made was very hyper focused.
Okay.
But I never really stopped doing all the other stuff, even though I did focus specifically on bear and prioritized bear for basically a decade.
Okay. Yeah.
But we can talk about that. But that's people say that, and from this side, it's like, well, I mean, I've whitetail bow hunted every year since I was 12, you know, and honestly, and am as passionate about whitetail bow hunting as anything I do. But that's not where I've made media and kind of interfaced with people,
Right.
you know.
Well, I mean, you look around and the cameras aren't picking it up, but I look at this wall behind me and I see that's very much true.
Yeah.
This is not a wall of a man who only bear hunts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit, and I think it's a good transition. Let's just go all the way back. Where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up spending your time, and what were you into growing up, and kind of how did that lead into a life of hunting?
So grew up here in Arkansas. My dad was a part of kind of the bow hunting revolution of the 1970s when bow companies started making good bows, and there was just this bow hunting revolution. He was a part of that. So I just grew up with a dad who loved to bow hunt. He was kind of a weekend warrior, but took it as serious as he could. And so I never knew a life without bow hunting, in that I just remember as a kid, my dad would go hunting and I would just be waiting at the door for him to come home, hoping he had a deer in the back of his truck.
Great.
And, you know, there's a picture of me when I was in preschool on a Thanksgiving day when we had some big play. I was dressed up like an Indian. My dad killed a deer, brought it to the school, took me out of school in my little Indian outfit, and took a picture of me by that deer. And I mean, I just was pumped from the very beginning about deer hunting. Started shooting a bow when I was in the 3rd grade. Could pull 40 pounds. Back in the day, you had to pull 40 pounds to be able to bow hunt in Arkansas.
Was he shooting a recurve at that point, or
No, a compound.
Okay.
You know, compounds came in really in the 70s.
Okay.
There were a lot of pretty good compound bows. Technology really increased. So when I was in the 4th grade, I could shoot a bow legally in Arkansas. Started hunting, and it was several years before I killed a deer. I think I was 15 before I killed a deer with a bow. But he was so serious about bow hunting. A lot of my friends killed deer before me because they were rifle hunting.
He started you off with a bow and was like, "This is what we're gonna do."
Yeah, there was no.
Oh, it's so
there
great.
was no. We didn't hunt with rifles. You know, we bow hunted, and that's what he wanted me to do. And so I was 15 before I killed a deer with a bow. But simultaneous to that, when I was my grandfather, who was a Baptist pastor in Western Arkansas, his whole life he was a quail hunter, bird dog man. That was what he did. He was
that was back when we still had quail in every little hole and field?
Yeah, for sure. We had, well, you know, through the 80s, really, they had a lot of quail. And so I grew up around bird dogs and him being an elite bird dog trainer. And I remember when I was probably 12, he gave me a book. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of it. It's up here somewhere. He gave me, at the time, what was one of the best bird dog training books in the country, a guy out of Oklahoma. I mean, my whole life I've remembered his name. And I read that book as a kid. He gave me a bird dog. I had
What kind of dog you have?
I had an English setter and I had a pointer at a different time. We had a couple coveys of quail behind our house, and we hunted quail all the time, rarely with a gun. Dad wouldn't let me carry a gun because I would hunt by myself, and me and Lucy, the English setter, would just find that covey of quail every day. I mean, we found those quail all the time, and I'd flush them up just like I was hunting, and then go find the singles and report back to my grandpa. And so quail hunted. And then, but we rarely killed wild quail. These quail were in a place we really couldn't shoot guns and hunt.
Yeah.
There's a little pocket that had some quail.
You were just kind of chasing them to get the experience.
Yeah, and just learn to love these dogs. And then we got into coon dogs. A buddy of mine's family coon hunted, and went in partners with my good buddy and got our first registered blue tick coon hounds when I was 14 years old, and hunted all through high school. That was a key element of what I did is we coon hunted. Got rid of my dogs when I went to college, but so I was bow hunting, quail hunting, turkey hunting. I mean, it was back to when we had a lot more turkeys than we have today.
Right.
In the early 90s and mid 90s. Turkey hunting
It's like the heyday of turkey hunting.
it really
around here,
was.
right?
It was. And I was growing up in rural Arkansas. I mean, 2 hours from here. And so we kind of did it all, for here, except bear hunt. We didn't bear hunt because at that time, the Arkansas bear story. I mean, I know you guys have done podcasts about that, but they reinstated the Arkansas bear season in 1980, and it was a very limited season in that you could just hunt them you could just hunt them like deer. Like there was no bait, no hounds, no mechanism to kill bears very easily, and very few bears were killed. It was difficult. And so it was just not something we pursued. And then in 2001, the second year I was in college, the Game and Fish, that's when they opened up where you could bait bear on private land in 2 zones here in Arkansas. And it really opened up the floodgates for bear hunters to actually have access to really kill bears. And so me and Dad baited a bear that year. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't know anything about bears. But in 2001, I killed a bear. And I'm not even, it's not even open for debate anymore. I used to open the floor with unless somebody disputes me, I'm going to say this. Anymore, I just definitively declare.
This is the truth.
I was the first guy in the state of Arkansas to kill a bear legally over bait, because I killed one at the crack of dawn.
Day one.
Crack of
Day
dawn on October 1st, 2001. Like you can barely see the ground.
Yeah.
And I killed a bear on the first day. It was legal. And I say the first legal one. I'm joking. I mean, there's no way to prove that. There's no honor in that.
I like it. Sounds like a good,
but
It's
good
out on the
rationale.
internet
There
now,
were-
so it's proven.
Yeah.
There were guys that we knew down where we lived that were killing bears over bait before that.
Yeah.
So that's why I say legally.
Legal.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But so and I'm skipping over the family stuff because there's some, during that time I got married and I even had our first daughter when I killed that bear in 2001. I can go back a little bit, but
yeah.
let me go ahead and say when I killed that bear, we had proficiency in everything that we hunted. I knew where the turkeys were and when they bred and how to call them in and what side of the mountain they were on. And deer, we understood them. We knew where deer trails were and what deer sign looked like and where to kill them and how to kill them. And this bear killed it. I was 21 years old, walked up to it and was just in shock at this incredible beast that was on the ground.
Yeah.
And it felt hollow to me at age 21. And the way I describe it, and it's kind of dumb that I would have to do this, but like there weren't TV cameras, there was no podcast. Like I look back, there was nothing, it wasn't hype. Like it was legitimate. Like I just was like, I just killed a great animal here. And back then, nobody knew that. I mean, when we first started hunting, the general vibe in the state of Arkansas was that this was a vermin animal.
Really?
Man, yeah.
Not like a
you
well-respected
boys
beast.
came along after these things had some real value.
Okay.
But for so long in the state, they were undervalued because they were not They weren't accessible. People didn't kill them. People didn't build culture around them. And people that lived in high bear density areas in the mountainous regions of Arkansas and lower White River drainage kind of hated them. I mean, I'm telling you, I lived in a great place to bear hunt. Bears tore up deer feeders. Bears tore up stands. Guys didn't want to mess with them. Guys thought they were bad food. Vermin mentality to the core. To the point.
Like a big raccoon, basically.
Yeah,
yes,
just tear up your stuff.
100%. And I mean, to the point when I killed this bear, my dad, I mean, who I'd say this if he was sitting here, I mean, it was kind of like, glad you got that out of the way, you know? And the next year, I was like, man, I'm going to bait bears again and shoot another one.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally was like, why? Why would you want to shoot another one of those?
Interesting.
And it took, now we're 22 years into having an accessible season, and we've really built a culture around bear hunting in the state. And we have told the world that this is a world-class resource that we have. And it's not just Arkansas. I mean, they're all over. Where they are an incredible beast and resource that we have. But I'm telling you, back in the day here, it was just like, killed a bear? Okay, well, good. That's cool.
Real quick, you said it felt hollow. What was your mindset going into it? Because if everybody around you is like, they're just vermin, they're in the way, they tear things up, what made you interested to even go after one in the first place?
Well, my dad was such a hardcore bow hunter that to him, anything other than a deer really didn't have value. We killed quite a few hogs back then on public land. So by that time, I had killed several hogs with a bow, and I loved shooting hogs. And my dad would shoot a hog and just kind of be like, why did I even shoot it? I don't even want to mess with it. I don't, I loved,
Whitetail was it for him.
I love shooting hogs. At the time I would have been excited about killing anything with a bow. So when I knew that we could hunt bears and have a good shot at them, I was like, man, yeah, let's kill a bear.
Let's do it.
And then I did not know though that it would ignite something inside of me that, would become a big part of my life, So, but yeah, that's kind of that story.
Yeah. So I know you skipped over some stuff. Feel free to go back into like school. I'm kind of curious, what did you go to school for? Because I know you went to the U of A.
Yeah.
What was your major?
Yeah. So I've got a degree in environmental soil and water science from the U of A.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And what was the original plan with that?
There was no plan, Kyle. I just knew I needed to go to college. That was just something that was always on the radar. I didn't want to go. Pretty much was stiff-armed going into college by my family. And it was a great decision. I'm so glad that I did it.
Yeah.
And my son is now in that position where he's a senior and he's talking about not wanting to go to college. And I'm like, man, you should go.
Yeah.
You should go. It was good for me. I never officially used the degree a day of my life because when I graduated college, I started my own landscape company, but started it because I wanted to be able to do two things: to raise my young family without a boss telling me where to go and what to do.
Okay.
And this is what I said from the beginning. So when the white oak leaves turn maroon in the fall, I could be hunting. That's why I had a business. I wasn't passionate about landscaping. I was good enough at it. I worked hard at it.
Right.
I enjoyed the hard work aspect of it. But I had been doing landscaping in college, and it was right at the big housing boom here in Northwest Arkansas. And I was like, man, I could probably make as much money just going into business for myself. And I did. And it ended up being a great decision for me to do that. I just learned so much as an entrepreneur, and it allowed me to do a whole bunch of other stuff that I never would have been able to. And that all goes back to my dad. I can't talk about my life without talking about my dad. My dad was a banker. He was a 8 to 5 banker. he was also a bow hunter, a jeeper. He kind of had a dual life where he wore a suit during the day and he came home and he did, you know, he was kind of a hillbilly at home.
Yeah.
That was the
Hillbilly
that
at
was
home.
the that was the he wouldn't like that terminology, but that's kind of the truth. And he always told us, boys, you got to work for yourself if you don't want to be just tied down. He always told us that, and so I was like, okay,
I'm going full,
This was as
full
he was-
hillbilly.
This is as he was tied down.
yeah,
So
yeah,
okay, So
yeah,
he's passing on, going, you do something different.
yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, and so that's what I did. That's what he told me to do, and so that's what I did. And yeah, it was risky. It might not have worked out the way it did, but and you know, the whole time I got married when we were young. My wife was 18 when we got married.
Okay.
Barely 18.
Yep.
I was 21. And man, I mean, this whole time, and I don't say this everywhere, but I mean, God's been directing our lives from the very beginning, man.
Mm.
I mean, the very beginning. It wasn't, it seems like happenstance or chance or a decision that was luck, but it really wasn't. I mean, I can go back and just document just how convicted we felt about doing stuff that didn't make sense, doing stuff that some people in our life thought was crazy or
Mhm.
risky or a
Right.
bad decision. But we were like, man, this is what we got to do. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is what, and it, you know, it's worked out for us so far. So, you know, I've been married now 23 years and we have 4 children. 2 of my daughters are in college. My 2 youngest sons are in school. And, you know, Misty and I got married young, had kids young. Both of us went to college. Misty now has her PhD. She's got her doctorate. And, you know, she had 4 kids while she was going to college,
Man,
you know, and
that's a grind.
it was,
Mhm.
it was, and it was a struggle, and but it built a unique character inside of our family that I think persists to this day, you know, and it was just our path. And you know, I advise my kids not to get married too young. It's like, you could probably wait a little while. You don't have to do it the way we did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm 43 now.
Okay.
And man, I really see after I feel like your life kind of starts when you're 20. Like before that, it's kind of like
I would agree with that.
you're like in the embryo. And
So you're like coming into junior year of college, basically.
Or just life as you want it. I feel like it can begin starting at 20.
yeah,
Making your own decisions.
yeah. And after 1 decade, you start to see some of the fruit of what you've built inside of your life. After 2 decades, you really start to see it.
Hmm.
It's like all the decisions that you made that seemed inconsequential
Right.
when you were 20, you reap the fruit of it. You really do. I mean, in so many ways, inside of relationships, inside of, I mean, I think about bears. It's like there were a lot of people that killed bears during that time, and I don't know. When I killed that bear, I was just like, I mean, I couldn't see what was coming,
Yeah.
but
Oh, there's no way you could
I
have.
knew that this was significant and that, you know, pretty quickly I just kind of latched on to this thing that is really just I don't give a lot of credit to the actual bear. I give credit to a pathway that I feel like God led me on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like very, very miraculously in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And but so 2 decades in, man, you're gonna be reaping the fruit
Seeing
of your
that-
life.
The fruit. That's awesome, man. So then walk me through from that day, I guess the day you killed your first bear over bait. How did that turn into, like, what captivated you about that enough to where you're like, you know what, I've got my landscaping company here, but I really want to do something more around bear hunting, and then how did that turn into Bear Hunting Magazine?
Yeah, so I was in college, killed this bear, went back to Fayetteville and went to the U of A library and found all the research thesis projects of PhD students that had gone through the U of A that had studied bears. There were about 4 people that had gotten their PhDs on bears at that time, maybe just even 3. It was all the research that had ever been done on Arkansas bears. And
Is it pretty old research too? Like
it
you're
was from
pulling
the
up stuff
early
from-
90s. It was a guy named, it's been so long. I memorized those books. It was 2 pretty well-known researchers in Arkansas, and they did all their research from 88 to 95. And it was all the research that we'd ever had, but they documented what would become what biologists at the time called the greatest reintroduction of large carnivores in the world.
Right.
They were the ones that said that in those thesis projects.
So they kind of coined that.
They made those declarations based upon colleagues and peer review. I mean, it was legitimate. But I read those thesis projects and just memorized data. I mean, I really did. I just was fascinated with it. And that's where I read that Arkansas used to be called the Bear State. Man, I'm telling you, in 2001, there weren't 100 people in this state that knew that. I'm exaggerating, but just people didn't like that.
Just wasn't common knowledge.
It wasn't. It was not.
And now just about everybody, I imagine, could tell you that.
I feel like
we used to be the Bear State. Now we're the natural state. Whatever.
I mean, and you know, obviously I had this little world over here and I'd never heard that, but I'm telling you, people didn't know that.
Yeah.
It was those books hadn't been opened up in so long. And I was just fascinated by this research and began to build this history that we had with bears here in Arkansas. And I was fascinated by it. And then just enjoyed hunting bears more and more. And actually between that and Bear Hunting Magazine, I started an organization called the Arkansas Black Bear Association. Did y'all ever know about that? No. Yeah, you guys are too young. How old are y'all?
28.
28. Oh, 27. You guys were in diapers when this was happening, man. No, in 2010, I started an organization called the Arkansas Black Bear Association.
Okay.
It was in existence for about 5 years. At one time, we had about 400 members. We had a magazine called the Arkansas Bear and Buck Journal. And I was doing this just after hours while I was landscaping. And the idea was to have a nonprofit hunting conservation organization for bears. And it went really well. I mean, we had it was the first time that I had published a magazine. I'll show you some of the magazines that we produced. They're funny to me now, but I mean, I scratched up the money and got a computer and built a magazine and went around the state and got stories.
And this is one-man show.
Yeah.
You're landscaping, family, and then kids go to bed.
Yeah.
Building a magazine.
And we first made 2 issues a year, then 4 issues a year. We did it for 5 years. And then I pretty much shut it down when I acquired Bear Hunting Magazine, which was in 2013 through the Arkansas Black Bear Association. I had become friends with the guy who owned Bear Hunting Magazine. So you stated earlier that I started.
I misspoke when I said you were the founder.
No,
I don't think I knew that.
I did not start Bear Hunting Magazine. Bear Hunting Magazine started in Becker, Minnesota in 2000, in the year 2000.
Okay.
And so a guy, a really nice fella, had he and his wife ran it for 14 years, and it was a successful business. It kind of started at the peak of the magazine world, like 2001. I mean, the internet wasn't that big.
Yeah.
But magazines were still really something people were very interested in. And I'd started this regional bear association. So I reached out to the Bear Hunting Magazine. One day I just typed in saw something online about Bear Hunting Magazine.
Yeah.
And
back in the dial-up
subscribed.
AOL days.
Yeah. I subscribed to this magazine. I got it in the mail. I remember thinking it was like a kind of a antiquated magazine, you know, like it wasn't too fancy, but it was legitimate. There were stories about bears from all over the country and bear outfitters, and it was it was a neat magazine. And then I told the editor, yada yada, I've got a bear association. Would you write it? about it in your magazine. And we kind of became friends. And very long story short, I started working for him doing his social media.
Okay.
Basically volunteered. I said, dude, you got to have a Facebook page. That would be good for your business. It was like 2011, kind of when Facebook was starting to pop up.
Okay. So this is way past the AOL dial-up internet.
Well,
days.
at this time, yeah,
Okay.
it would have been. It would
Okay.
have been. Yeah. Now, when he started it in 2000, it would have been like that.
Gotcha.
So this is internet's rolling pretty good. And I built him a Facebook page, Bear Hunting Magazine. And it's real funny to hear him tell the story. I convinced him he needed a Facebook page, and he was willing to pay for it. And he thought it was going to be like $1,500 a month or something.
No
Like,
way.
he thought it was going to be big.
He's like, I better get the wallet out. Here we go.
Well, and he said, he was like, Clay, what would you charge me to do this for me? And I was like, $100. I mean, and he was like, okay.
Sweet.
And
Puts
he didn't
the other $1,400 back in his pocket.
He
Yeah.
didn't tell me
Okay.
until years later when I bought the magazine from him. He was like, yeah, I really expected to pay a lot more for that. But it was not. It was oh shoot, I would have done it for free.
Yeah.
You know? And but the relationship that we built through that 2 years later in 2013, he basically wanted to get out. Just like all of a sudden he was just like, we're done. And he made it possible for me to own the magazine. I mean, we kind of worked out a deal that was very generous and beneficial to me, and acquired Bear Hunting Magazine on July 1st, 2013. And I had built my landscape business. When I first talked to him, he was like, well, what about your business? I mean, can you just like stop?
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because I had at one time I had some crews and was really trying to build up a bigger business with employees, and man, I just never was very good at that.
Mm.
I was really good at dealing with people and giving them what they wanted and me doing the work, but I was always frustrated. I could never really build what I thought I was supposed to be building. Just never worked out.
Yeah.
And when I got the email from him about the business, I was working by myself, and I remember talking to him on the phone, and he was like, well, Clay, what about your business? And I said, man, I got 3 days left on this job, and I don't owe anybody any money. I can do whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just park my tractor and can get this business from you, you know? And it was pretty unique in that I could just stop, you know.
You could turn it off like that.
Just turned it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a major deal too. I mean, I had a young family. I mean, at that time, golly, all my kids were, you know, probably, I don't know how old they would have been. It was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, they were young and depended on me. And so it was a risky financial decision. You know, it was kind of like, is it smart to buy a magazine in 2013? You know,
Yeah.
is this a good deal? Is this
all in on paper?
Yep.
Paper print?
Yep. But we just felt like it was what we needed to do. We did it, and it worked, and it was a great business. It really was. It was a great business, and we did a lot to it. You know, I knew that we needed to modernize it, and we got a new website, and we started a YouTube channel, and we started a podcast, and we just started revitalizing the content and branching out. And I kind of took a aggressive role inside the magazine of, you know, I was like, I got to know the world, man.
Yeah.
I wanted to know bear hunting with dogs and spot and stalk in the West and baiting bears in Arkansas and hunting Canada and going to Alaska brown bear hunting. I mean, I really set out to know every possible way to hunt a bear in North America. And again, we dove into more stuff in 10 years than had ever been documented. I mean,
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there was nobody that was putting out the kind of media that we were just about. Man, the dog hunting world. I had a very prominent guy in the outdoor industry. When he heard that I got the magazine, I saw him at a trade show. We were talking about the magazine. He was familiar with it.
Yeah.
Guy I looked up to. You'd know his name if I said it. And he said, Clay, he said, let me tell you, let me give you one piece of advice for this magazine. Forget the dogs. He said, that's dying. It's over. You don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I was sitting there, and I had this background in coon hunting,
Yeah.
but really very, very little knowledge of bear hunting with hounds at the time. And, you know, I just knew. I was like, I didn't say this to him, but I just said, you are dead wrong.
You're wrong.
You are dying on the vine. And I don't, it's just intuition. And man, we started diving into the bear hound world, and it is one of the richest hunting cultures in this country.
Mm-hmm.
It truly is. I mean, it is one of the most unique hunting traditions in the country. Oldest. I mean, golly, all this stuff is sitting in tree stands and tree saddles. Like, that's not tradition.
No, that's new school.
Yeah, and I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
But hunting with hounds, that is old school American.
Yeah.
And we tapped into that, and we tapped into these authentic characters. And I traveled all over and went to Appalachia and went to all over the place and found these houndsmen and started writing about them. And people, we were the only people speaking up for hounds. Now there's podcasts and stuff.
Right.
Man, I just thought I was writing my death sentence. I really did. Like that time I had gotten at, I've already skipped over a bunch of stuff. I had started out my career before Arkansas Bear and Buck Journal writing whitetail articles.
Okay.
100%. In 2008, had my first article ever published about that deer that I killed right there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you just always want to be a writer? Like,
Nah.
God, it sounds like you've been writing it every step of the way, kind of through this. Why?
I've never had any intentions to be in the outdoor space, or it was never like my goal. I want to do this. I just stuff happened, and I just did it.
Well, and you wanted to hunt.
When
the fall came around, you wanted to do your own thing.
Yeah.
I think I have heard pieces of that story, but if you want to tell it in a...
Let me figure out a way to tie this, because I realized I missed a big piece of, I got into all this through freelance outdoor writing about whitetails.
Okay.
But let me go back to my hound deal, then I'll come back to that buck.
Okay.
I felt like that I had other people told me that I was making a mistake by getting into even the bear world, taking myself out of the whitetail world. It was like, why do people don't care about bears?
Kind of coming from that vermin mentality.
And I kind of thought, yeah, you're right, they don't.
Yeah.
But I didn't care. It's like I knew this is what I was supposed to do, wanted to do. I saw something, and honestly, I felt like I was just signing the paperwork to just be an obscure person in the outdoor industry.
A hillbilly.
I mean, I really did. It's like it's never occurred to me that anything significant would happen in the outdoor space. But what ended up happening is that we dove into this thing that, and I'm not saying nobody wrote stories about bears. People did. But the outdoor industry in 2013 was deathly afraid to talk about bears. Nobody was today, there's spring bear hunting stories. There's bear hunting stories everywhere, and I love it. It's what we needed. It's what we wanted. 2013, 10 years ago, that was not happening.
Say, it's crazy to me that it's only been a decade.
Yeah, it feels like
a
30
lot.
years ago to me.
Maybe just because there has been so much talk and so many new personalities or people who are excited about it and passionate about it. But yeah, I mean, if you would have asked me without knowing the story, how long have we been passionate about bears in Arkansas or just in the West, anywhere to hunt them and track them and dogs and all of it, I would have said, 30 or 40 years easily. At least when the bear season kicked off.
Yeah.
It was legal to hunt them. It had to have been as long as that.
Yeah.
It's only been 10 years. That's crazy.
I mean, and you're going to find the guy that's like, oh man, I've been hunting bears.
Sure.
But I'm telling you, Well, in the bear hunting rising to the top, or rising inside of North America has also coincided with bear populations expanding rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Actually,
and
they're to
that's
hunt.
something that we were seeing 10 years ago. And it's like, hey, bear hunting's going to be big, you know, and it's widespread. You can hunt bears more places than you can hunt white-tailed deer.
Mm.
I mean, bears, the natural range of the black bear is the second largest natural range of any big game animal in North America, behind the mountain lion. From the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast, from the Arctic Circle down into Old Mexico, minus the Great Plains, you know, what naturally would have been
Right.
you know, Kansas, Nebraska, like literally treeless plains,
Right.
minus that section. Black bears are everywhere.
Mm.
And right now we're seeing a lot of repopulation in these places that didn't, that their bears were extirpated.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, so when I say you can hunt bears in more places than you can hunt white-tailed deer, really I'm talking about natural distribution of animals, you know?
Yeah.
And now but bears are number 2 in the record books behind white-tailed deer. You know, if you're a bow hunter, there's a high probability that the first animal you're going to take is a deer and the second animal is going to be a bear. But we started talking about hunting with hounds. We started finding these characters, these gems of guys that just never thought the world would care what they did. We started taking baiting bears head on. I mean, like, it's so my soapbox. If somebody wants to talk about ethics and hunting bears and comparing it to whatever else they hunt, I will debate any person on any place, on any planet, on any day, on any platform. I mean, you don't have to like hunting bears over bait. I mean, there's other ways I like to hunt them better, but it is an incredibly effective management tool for harvesting older age bears in places that have thick vegetation. It's a management tool. It's an incredible thing that allows you to be intimate and up close with a big game animal, unlike any other hunt in North America. I mean, you know, being close to, I mean, how many bighorn sheep hunters are, you know, up close and personal and watching their animal like 10 yards from, I mean, there's a lot of, and I would rather not kill a bear over bait. I'd rather kill one out in the national forest, you know? So it's not about that, but it's about, don't be playing your little higher than thou elite. Like baiting bears is, oh man, I love it.
Now I wish we had somebody here who had an opposing viewpoint.
No, I would I would embarrass them.
Let's get Dan on the mic and see.
Dan, you will go home embarrassed.
I don't know if Dan has a viewpoint. Period.
I don't think he does.
No. I'm coming off hot, and I don't want to sound arrogant. It's just hard when you're right so much. But no,
Well, I mean,
my point is that for a long time, even in the outdoor space, hunting bears over bait was kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the hunting industry. People didn't want to talk
like a
about
taboo,
it.
like we just don't touch it. It's
People were afraid to touch it. They were afraid to talk about hunting with dogs and all this stuff. And you know, bears live in such a wide geographic swath of the country that you have to use different tactics if you really want to consistently be able to manage them through hunting.
Yeah.
Like you need, you know, in 2001, the Arkansas Game and Fish decided that we were going to manage our bears with bow hunters on private land over bait, like a strategic decision. This is the way we're going to do it. They could have used dogs. They could not have used hunting in national forests, just turning the guys loose. Like it would not have worked.
Right.
We could not have killed the bear. Anyway, I'm intentionally trying to stoke the fire there, just because I
can tell you're
pumped
passionate.
up. I am.
I'm kind of curious. I want to hear, you know, of going on that tour of the country and around North America. Maybe kind of one story that stands out, going and finding different ways to chase bears, whether it be hounds over bait, spot and stalk. Do you kind of have a memory from that period and that time in your life that stands out as like, man, that was epic? Like I want to chase that feeling all the time.
You know, I like hunting bears in a lot of different ways. I mean, some of the most some of the most rewarding bear hunts I've been on have been out west, spot and stalk, when I've taken my mules out to different places out there and hunted. It was a lot of that kind of hunting that I love. You know, rifle hunting, big country, new country with the mules. It was an adventurous 30-hour drive up there with my mules, and there was just a lot of that I really loved. I killed a bear in Saskatchewan in I think it was 2017, and we were 22 miles from the nearest road. We were going up a river system. 22 miles from the nearest road. From the road where we left the truck, we're 22 miles, and that was the closest road. In the other direction, east of us, the nearest road was like 58 miles.
Okay.
So we're in like a 70 plus, almost 80 mile swath of wilderness.
Yeah.
And
out there.
In Canada, that is common.
Yeah.
Here, that would be the most remote place in the lower 48. I mean, like they say, it's debated that the most remote place in the lower 48 states is the headwaters of the Yellowstone River.
Okay.
In Wyoming.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I've been told, it's like 36 miles from a road, you know, and that's the most remote place that we have in the lower 48. Alaska has is a whole different animal, but Canada is also a whole different animal. Lots of wilderness. And so we're bear hunting there and hunting on the ground, had a traditional bow, and had a big male bear come in that I'm convinced had never seen a human. The outfitter who we were working with had never seen this bear on camera, and it showed up and just the way it acted. And it was the bear that came in and touched my arrow. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've seen that. I know for a fact.
Yeah.
Have you seen it, Kyle?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
YouTube it later.
It's walking by and
Like
got that close to you.
gets
Is
in
that
your
what you're saying?
in your face.
It was so the video went viral. Like I see it almost every week on some random Instagram page.
Comes up on your For You page and you're
Some
like, thanks.
obscure
It does all the time.
page.
Yeah. That's pretty funny.
No, but it went viral on our bear hunting magazine page. This bear just comes in and he sees me. I'm on the ground and I'm wanting to shoot the bear, and he comes in and basically gets so close to me, I backpedal and use my arrow to poke him in the nose. And when it pokes him, he stands up on his hind legs about 3/4 of the way and smells of me and Brent Reeves, and then drops down on all fours, and I shoot him at about 3 yards.
No way.
Oh my God. That was a unique experience. It was the only time I've ever really been threatened.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had bears like woof and stomp around and pop their teeth. Like that's pretty common in the bear world. But that was the only time I've ever really thought, okay, this is what it feels like right before you get roughed up by a bear.
Yeah. Not a great feeling, sure.
But I've enjoyed hunting bears in Appalachia with Roy Clark and some of the guys out there. I hunted this last year on Prince of Wales in Alaska, and killed a bear while I was in the ocean.
Yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah, I used a wetsuit and swam up to a bear. That was pretty cool.
Have y'all released that video or talked about it yet?
No.
Okay. I was going to ask questions, but I don't know if there's
you can't,
a policy there.
We have talked about it.
Okay.
We have talked about it.
You want
it'll be an episode of, pretty sure an episode of MeatEater
Okay.
at some point pretty soon.
Okay. You want to tell it here too?
Oh, I mean, sure. I've
willing,
told
I'd
it a
love
couple
it.
times. So we were hunting Southeast Alaska, and the way that you hunt the bears there is the tides swing very widely. It's one of the, as I understand it, it has one of the biggest tide swings in the world, where the tides go way out. And basically when this low tide, bears come down and feed on blue mussels and crabs and fish and different stuff. And so on low tide, you take your boat out and you see bears on the banks. And then you, from your boat, the typical way that Steve Renella likes to hunt them, you have a canoe with you in your big boat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Put the canoe in. Canoe downwind of the bear. They're pretty tolerant of a boat out a couple hundred yards. They're just not interested in stuff in the water.
Yeah.
If you get within 150, 200 yards, they do. And you can't shoot them out of a boat. And so you see a bear, you put your canoe in, step from your boat in the canoe, paddle downwind, get on shore, and then stalk them. And typically, you can bow hunt them. A lot of guys are rifle hunting. And Steve Ranella had the idea for years of using a wetsuit. He's a big
Diver.
Yeah, he's a big diver.
Yeah. Spear fisherman.
Yep.
And so he knew all the gear, knew the people to get gear from, and knew that you could manage being in that cold water. This is like far north,
Yeah.
And
was this your first time in a wetsuit?
yeah,
I was about to say.
I mean,
Not a
I
whole
had
lot of
it.
use for a wetsuit around here.
I had it. I got it before I went and whatnot, and messed around with it.
Sure.
But,
Looked at yourself in the mirror, made sure you look good.
no, I do not look good in a wetsuit.
I don't think anybody looks good in a wetsuit,
Yeah.
to be honest.
And so Steve was like, "Man, I've always wanted to use a wetsuit and just swim up to him." And that was about it. And I just said, "Well, let's do it. I'll do it."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, okay, there's some logistical challenges you're going to have to figure out, like carrying your bow." And he had the idea of a boogie board, just a styrofoam, little cheap, like $14 boogie board that I bought, spray painted it, put some holes in
Like
it.
what you get at the Walmart in Destin.
Yeah,
Just
oh
a
yeah,
boogie board.
100%.
This is awesome.
Like weighs like half a pound,
Uh-huh.
but 3 foot long, probably 18 inches wide. I drilled 2 holes through it and put some hay string through it and tied my bow onto that boogie board and put my rangefinder clipped onto the bow. And basically, the story's longer than you probably we want to tell, but long story short, I tried to kill one without the wetsuit for a couple of days, stalking
The canoe. Get on and stalk.
yeah,
Okay.
and got close to some bears, and that'll work. I mean, like you can kill them that way.
Yeah.
But we made multiple stalks and got within 30 yards multiple times, but just the wind would switch or the bear wouldn't turn right. So there's a lot of bears. You're seeing a lot of bears, and so the second day that I hunted, it was like, hey, let's try the wetsuit. So put on the wetsuit and had a cameraman with me. And we set on this island. There's a small island out from a point where we'd been seeing a bunch of bears. And basically, we saw this bear from the island, jumped in, swam across a canal. While we were swimming, the bear was coming towards us. We didn't realize it. We're out in the middle of this canal, and the bear pops up like within bow range. We float down, get behind a big rock. I get my bow untied, put my release on, get back in the water, swim just right up to it, 12 yards.
Are you just holding the bow above the water at this point?
I'm pulling it on the boogie board.
Oh, you still got it on the boogie.
Well, I left my boogie board behind the rock, and this time
And are you standing on the
I am
or
in basically waist deep water, but hunkered down just
That's
where
so
my
cool.
neck is sticking out of the water.
Uh-huh.
And at this point, I wasn't worried about the bow. The bow's underwater.
Yeah.
Like bow's like half underwater.
Yeah.
And we just went, and the wind was good, and I just got right up where I could see the bear good, and just raised up, drew the bow 12 yards, shoot, pass through, bear falls, rolls. If it rolled one more time, it rolled in the ocean.
Oh my gosh.
It was a pretty neat experience.
Dude, that's epic.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a pretty neat experience.
That's probably one of the cooler bear stories out there.
It was a great tactic, man. I mean, like it just works well, and I could talk about it for an hour.
So you're the first man to kill a bear legally over bait in Arkansas, and the first man to kill a bear off a boogie board.
Maybe.
I
And then
think
now-
if somebody else had done it before, we would know about
Yeah,
it,
you-
because that's a pretty wild story.
Yeah.
The boogie board bear.
The boogie board.
That's
man.
fantastic.
It was well documented, so it'll be out, and you'll see it on MeatEater at some point.
That'll be
Heck
cool
yeah.
to watch.
That is cool.
It was well documented, so that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
How does the deer tie into everything?
Yeah, let's do another
mentioned-
epic hunting story.
You'd mentioned that as part of the story of
Yeah.
landscaping business, jumping into media. How does that affect things?
Yeah. So that deer, it was in 2007, and I'd seen that deer early in the season, and I hunted that deer for 15 straight mornings with my bow and killed it. Finally killed it on October 18th, 2007, and that deer. I wrote 3 articles about that deer. Never considered writing, had never written, but I just killed this deer. And at the time, the Arkansas Sportsman's magazine was kind of the big thing regionally.
Okay.
And I hunted down the editor through some connections and was just like, hey, I killed a big deer in Arkansas. How about I write a story? And he was a young guy named Patrick Hogan, who was not much older than me, or maybe as old as me at the time. And he was like, yeah, it'd be great. Write a story. So I wrote a story. He kind of encouraged me. And then I reached out to Bowhunter magazine and wrote an article for them. It was a different article, but it was the same buck.
Okay.
And this buck, it's a good deer. You know, I think it's got 21 scoreable points and scored 169 inches gross. And biggest deer I'd ever killed. And I mean, there's a long story.
Just palmated antlers too. I mean,
yeah. And so I wrote an article for Bowhunter, and then wrote an article also for North American Whitetail. All different articles, and so I had 3 articles published about that deer, and that's what got me into the outdoor space.
Gotcha.
It's just kind of, I was like, wow, I could write articles.
Yeah.
And so the next year, I think I had 2 articles published. And the next year, I think I had 10 articles. And the most I ever had was about 25 articles, maybe around 2011. I think I had published 25 articles in a year, freelance articles with just different bow hunting magazines. Was doing a lot of whitetail stuff. And so, yeah, that's where I really got my start in the outdoor industry.
Gotcha.
And then started Arkansas Black Bear Association, had this regional magazine, and then in 2013 got Bear Hunting Magazine.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're chugging along. You've got Bear Hunting Magazine. You mentioned you had a podcast. I remember actually you had mentioned Clay to me back probably in 2018 or 2019, and I had gone and listened to some of your podcasts on Bear Hunting Magazine podcasts. And you were like, man, this guy, he's down in West Fork. He's a local guy. He's doing a really cool thing. So I'd gone and checked it out. I'm curious now, at what point did the MeatEater relationship start to happen? And like, how did you know when they were kind of first noticing you? Like, what was that very first thing? Like, oh, there's MeatEater and they're reaching out to me, or they're noticing what I'm doing, or anything like that?
Sure. You know, I emailed Steve Ranella in probably 2015.
Okay.
Before he was ultra famous.
Okay.
And I don't think he would even remember it.
Was this, he still had the MeatEater brand? Or was it even just getting, even that was
I
just
think he probably had MeatEater. But the MeatEater that we know pretty much came into existence in 2018.
Okay.
Like the big MeatEater that's like had a lot of different avenues and Netflix and all this stuff, you know. So I had a connection with him years ago, but really he wouldn't have known my name.
Okay.
He wouldn't have. I don't think he remembers it.
Why'd you reach out to him?
Oh, bear stuff. Like he had killed some bears.
Makes sense, bear.
And Steve's always loved bears. And I think I wanted to use a photo of him in the magazine or something.
Okay.
And one time I asked him to write something for me, and he didn't do it. But you know, so I had small connection with him. But he was always somebody that I really genuinely respected in the outdoor space. More than anybody. I mean, long before I worked for him, long before I ever thought I would, I was like, Steve Ranella's doing something different. He's unique. He's authentic. Like, there's a lot of good stuff. And I mean, man, you know, it might sound like I'm buttering up, you know, the guy I work for, but I mean, he changed the hunting industry.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, like single-handedly, just by bringing in this kind of academic, philosophical movement away from, you know, 30 buck kills in 30 minutes on this DVD and stuff that I grew up loving.
Yeah.
But he put a different narrative on it that was so so compelling and fit. It's like
Mm-hmm.
my family literally was raised on deer meat and bear meat. I mean, we didn't think it was cool. It's just what we ate.
Right.
I mean, we didn't have a ton of money. I didn't grow up that way. I mean, I grew up in a very middle class family, and wild game. Like my dad will tell you that when he was a rural, well, he grew up in Arkansas, so I mean it's pretty much rural. But he grew up in Hot Springs, which
Okay.
at the time was like a big city.
Yeah.
To him, and he grew up with parents that were, his dad was in World War II, and man, they were trying to get away from all this poverty, and the poor people ate deer meat. Poor people ate squirrels.
Mm-hmm.
They literally were running away from it. Like, and my dad liked to hunt and stuff,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was not like a crown jewel to eat a deer steak at our house at all. Like, they wanted to eat beef, man.
Yeah, they were trying to move up in the world, if you will.
Yes. Oh, 100%. And that's the way it was.
Okay.
And then I always thought that was kind of weird. Just naturally, I was just like, now why don't we? This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Kill a deer and eat it. And so when I got married and lived on my own, we lived off deer meat. I mean, like, it wasn't a game. We were going through college and had 4 kids, and I was bow hunting and
Wasn't for the Instagram.
no. And
Yeah.
Renella comes along
Yeah.
and all of a sudden says, "That's cool."
Yeah.
And we were like, "What?"
It is.
Nobody had told us this was cool.
Yeah.
And hunt what you eat and all this stuff that we were already doing, but nobody told us it was cool. Nobody told us it was sophisticated. Nobody told us that it was organic and healthy, and it just put a new spin on it that really changed the hunting space. And then not going after big bucks and a lot of the things he did I really respected. And so long story short, at some point I was invited to be on the MeatEater podcast, I think in 2020,
Okay.
maybe 2019. I think 2019. And that was the shock of my life. I was in the bear world, talking about baiting bears and hunting with hounds, and the mainstream world didn't want to have anything to do with that. And I kind of figured MeatEater didn't either, to be honest with you. And he invited me on MeatEater podcast. And at the time, it for real was like the biggest thing that ever happened in my career.
Yeah.
At
You're
the
like,
time,
what the heck is going on?
there was I feel like, I've never said this to Steve, but I feel like there was a time, well, kind of like there was a time when if you went on Joe Rogan, you became famous and your business like went crazy.
Exploded. Yeah.
For real. There was a sweet, and today it's still very influential to be on Rogan, but there was a time where if you were on Joe Rogan, like you like made it. There was a time when I feel like MeatEater was the same way.
Okay.
The MeatEater podcast.
Okay.
So for you to get invited, you're
Yes.
like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like I'm making it.
This is about to
100%.
happen.
100%. Like it was a big deal for me to go and be on MeatEater. And man, Brunella, I still, after working with him closely for 3 years now, I still have so much respect, but he's such a goober. I remember when I went there, like he didn't greet me, just like I flew all the way to Bozeman to be on this podcast. And it's like, you just sit down in a chair and he hardly acknowledged me. Podcast comes on. We talk for 2 hours. And then, it's like, I just walk out and
He's
it's like,
all right, go home.
yeah. And I mean, and at the time I knew I wasn't offended. I was just like, I guess that's the way he rolls.
Yeah.
He's not from the South, where we'd
must
be
be a
like,
busy
"Hey
fella."
man, good to see you. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming up."
I think we chatted for 40 minutes before we sat down.
Oh, yeah, we
here,
were-
So
Yep.
it's
Absolutely.
a South
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. So anyway, we had a great time, and he was, I mean, engaged, and I mean, we enjoyed, I enjoyed being on the podcast, but heard nothing until like a year later when he called me and just said, "Hey, you want to come work for MeatEater?" I mean, literally, he wrote me a 1-sentence email with no greeting or didn't say my name. He wrote me a 1-sentence email. I would say this if he was sitting here. A 1-sentence email that said, "What's your cell phone number?" And I mean, it was like, you know, and I just,
You're like, is this spam? I don't understand.
yeah. And so no, it was a big deal, man. It was a life-changing deal.
Yeah.
And when, so I gave him my cell phone number, and he's like, I'm going to call you. And so he called me. And I mean, pretty much we had like a 4-minute conversation. And he was like, you want to come work for MeatEater? And I was like, well, I mean, maybe. You know, what are we talking about here? I've got a business, and no, he was just like, man, we like what you're doing. You know, we'd love to have you come be on the MeatEater team. He said you could keep, you know, our current arrangement was I could still operate Bear Hunting Magazine.
Yeah.
And I did for a year into MeatEater. I owned and operated Bear Hunting Magazine.
Okay.
As well as did the MeatEater stuff.
And
you know,
so what were you doing at the time? Because I'm curious, like, what was the original vision? Kind of how did it start? And then
with MeatEater,
yeah, like for you coming on, what was the original vision for bringing you on?
They wanted me to do a podcast.
Okay.
That was it. And just be a part of the MeatEater team. Like I was hired on as a full-time employee, even though I was doing work for Bear Hunting Magazine. And as much as it sounds like I'm bad-mouthing Ranella, man, they've been an incredible company to work for. They've given me so much freedom, so much support. Everything they've said to me, they've done. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for them. I really do. And going into it, I didn't know if I would or not. I mean, for real, it's like it all looks good on the outside, but when you get in there, like, what's it going to be like? And I told them from the very beginning. I didn't deal with Steve through all the, I just kind of dealt with Steve at first, and then they kind of handed me off to the other people in the organization that work on this kind of stuff.
Send a few longer emails and
answer
the question.
Yeah. And I remember they were talking, and I said, I don't know if I'll be a good employee or not. I said, I've never had a real job my whole life. I've always worked for myself. Never had a boss. I was joking with him, obviously, but it was true. I had worked for myself for so long, landscaping, the magazine. And I said, probably the biggest challenge for me will be kind of being a part of a corporation, I mean, MeatEater's a big corporation now. And, but it's been great. They've been fantastic.
That's so encouraging to hear, because I mean, you never know what's the kind of public facing face and then what happens behind the scenes. But I've loved MeatEater ever since they came on the scene, and you just hope they're as good as they look on TV as far as their friendships and their love for what they do, and the way they pursue the outdoors. One thing, you're actually mentioning it earlier, but I'll talk to people who they're maybe not anti-hunting, but they're, hunting's not their thing. It's not been a part of their culture, their heritage growing up, or they probably think it's just mean or whatever. It's not something you do as a civilized person.
Inhumane or something.
And they love MeatEater. Yeah. And y'all have done such a good job of showing there's actually a lot of history within this. There's a lot more than just pursuing an animal and killing it. We can actually do it in a way that's tasteful, that I actually think has kind of helped elevate. I mean, I know it has, because it's a huge brand, but I mean, it's elevated conservation and care and like love for natural resources, but also making that lifestyle okay again, where it maybe felt like it wasn't for a little bit. There's probably a time where it's kind of contested of like, are we going to do this as modern Americans or where are we going here? And I don't know. I appreciate it, because that's how I grew up. That's what I grew up doing. It's like, I want this to be okay. I don't want people to think I'm weird if I tell them I bow hunt on the weekends or whatever. Just love what y'all do. It's fun talking to friends who watch it on Netflix, and they're like, and it's on Netflix, which says something, because Netflix isn't going to put a kill $30 in 30 minutes hunting show on there. So.